Kia ora e whānau, ko Pamela Bell, tōku ingoa. I'm Pamela Bell. I'm here from the Institute of Building, and today we have our industry insights. So it's great to see some folks online, and of course we record these sessions so that we can share them online through the resources tab of our website, nziob.org.nz. Today we are focused on software for buildings, and I'll be introducing our guests in a moment. But first of all, I wanted to let you know about what's happening at the Institute so that you know what to rush to the website under the events tab and sign up for. So we are heading into our conference season. We are hosting DigiCom, Building a Digital Global Community, next Thursday at the Altea Centre in Tamaki, Auckland. We've got a full day of global presentations and a lovely local case study about Archives NZ. So it's going to be heaps of fun. We're also in that orientation time of year for our students. So we've got a number of PPE parties. So for anyone who is a Next Gen member, you can come along and get free PPE gear, which is pretty enticing if you live in one of the major centres, and that's through March and April. If you live in Tamaki, Auckland, you can come along to the fishing event on the 4th of April. We also have site visits planned in the next couple of months in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. And we also have got our mentor mix. Our call for mentors has just gone out. That was in the news source last week. So we're calling out for mentors to come and be part of Industry Insights, be part of the Institute of Building's Mentor Mix program. And that's a 6-month program which has got online components, and we'll be calling for mentees before long. And it's interesting that we talk about mentoring when we're in a digital space, because it brings to mind that lovely term reverse mentoring, which is what can we learn from our young people in that space as well. And of course, because everything points to the Building People Awards, on the 2nd of April, we will be opening for our awards nominations, and we will be bringing back the category for digital technology that we introduced in 2024. So I'm very pleased today to have 2 speakers, one of which won the inaugural digital technology category, which is Nick Clements, and the other person is Marcel van Oosterom from Cadpro, and they're part of our national partnership whānau because of the Autodesk connection. So first of all, I'll ask Marcel, could you please introduce yourself?
Yep, certainly can. Thanks for inviting us to join this session. It wasn't me that was supposed to be here, but one of my colleagues, who is the esteemed Gary Page, is currently in Australia working with a group of clientele on some very interesting projects, and also a digital platform that allows them to collaborate better in their ventures. So my name is Marcel van Oosterom. I'm a technical consultant at Cadpro New Zealand Limited, and been in the industry for just about over 35 years, so going pretty great. But still enjoying it. And I wish I was a lot younger today, because it's very exciting technology that we're, or technology era that we're embarking on, especially with all the AI coming on stream as well over the last few years. So the days when I started with computer-aided design was back when it was still drafting boards and 2D CAD. We rolled into the 3D environment pretty quickly after that in the late 1980s. And obviously throughout the time over the last 20 years, BIM has become a norm, I would say, and especially Revit has been their flagship from the Autodesk environment since 2000. And we've seen that industry growing stronger and stronger. Obviously, there's many other solutions around in the market that have a role play in their industry, especially with regard to building design. And Cadpro actually also looks after a lot of other market sectors, including infrastructure, the architecture, engineering, construction, as well as the product design and manufacturing. So we enjoy the technology, and we enjoy bringing it to clientele that wants to adopt the technology in order to further their business and to make them a little bit smarter. So it's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Nick, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Pam, and thanks for having me on this. Yeah, so I guess I'm about as grey as Marcel, so I've been around a while. I first got involved in the building industry in the 90s, and I wasn't really into computers at all back then, but sort of realised that it was pretty inefficient how the industry communicated, and sort of came up with a problem that I saw around that and looked for opportunities to be able to improve it. So I was marketing manager back at Carter's back then. And then a few years later, I managed to get the opportunity to pitch an idea to Carter Harvey to actually see if we could build a system to improve how information flowed through the construction process. So that was 2001. And we basically looked to try and build a software system based around ArchiCAD back in those days. We did look at Revit. That was actually before Autodesk owned Revit, but it was still pretty embryonic back then. And so we went with ArchiCAD and basically looked to try and build a frame and truss design system and a costing system within ArchiCAD. Challenging. A long story, but that so yeah, Carter Holt decided not to carry on with that. I got punted, and the start of the software business, looking to try and carry on with the ideas we had and using what we'd learnt in the time at Carter Holt Harvey. And that's morphed into my business now, which is called YourQS. We're not a software provider. I'd describe us as a software-enabled service. So we are quantity surveyors, and we help. We're mainly residential focused, so we help builders and residential designers, architects understand their construction costs. So for builders, we're typically helping them prepare their proposals for their clients. So basically costing the entire build and giving them presentation documents they can use. And for designers, we're typically helping them understand the construction costs at an early stage in the design process. And what we've done, the sort of experiences we got with working with things like Revit and ArchiCAD, is we've developed add-ons for both of those products that allow us to extract the information out of the 3D model that we can make use of within our software system. We can then import it into our system and then do the work that we need to do to complete the costing process. So I guess yeah, we're based in Onehunga, got a team of 12.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And it's really interesting, the complementary aspects that you've got in terms of your offerings to the market. So Marcel at Cadpro, I see that you are very much solution and support focused as a software provider. And Nick at YourQS, I see that you are very much, as you said, a tech-enabled service provider. But what's interesting is that you both share an interest in designers and servicing design companies or designers, consultants, and specifiers. So tell us a little bit about designers as clients. What does this mean for how we deal with designers or how we treat our intellectual property? Did either of you have some thoughts on that?
It's a broad topic. I suppose Cadpro is very much associated with change management in organizations in order to drive the technology within those businesses and provide enablement to achieve those business outcomes that those clients are looking for. So the various technologies that we have on board these days are not just softwares with regard to doing the building design, but it's also very much in the realm of collaboration and coordination of services between consultants as well, which is important because I think the world is definitely not an island. We all need to enable us to be able to work together. And that's probably where a lot of discussion still has gone on for many, many years back in the 1990s on the intellectual property of who owns what data. And I think that is becoming more of a hot topic now, especially because while we're still working very much in the visual environment where we're looking at 3D pictures and 2D plans, it's actually the data behind those elements that is becoming more important than anything. And especially with quantity surveys, the likes of Nick, of course, the data is not necessarily visible, but the data is sitting behind the elements in order to be able to quantify those elements as such. So the ownership of the data, that's an interesting topic because in some cases, well, in most cases, I suppose, lead architects or lead consultants in a project still regard themselves as being the ownership of that intellectual property that is being created. But it is apparent that it is important to be able to share the data, because without the ability to share the data, you're actually stifling a project progress as well. So we see more coming in front of project-based data that is shared amongst consultants that work within those project environments and are associated with one another to deliver those projects at the end of the day. But then when it comes to client handover, that's where things get a little bit blurry, and not only client handover, also handover at the time of when contract is coming on board as well. So that needs to really be discussed right at the start of a project with regard to, where's the data created, where is the data hosted, especially with the cloud services coming online as well, which means that organizations may have their own hub or their own account where they host the data, which means that others need to be invited in and only can get access to the data if they've been given the right to access the data. So that generally generates quite a bit of discussion. Autodesk, interestingly enough, have developed a technology called Bridge, which allows different hubs of data to be connected, which means that consultants can still host their data at their site, but actually link their data with other consultants using that Bridge capability. So there is more of a crossover happening with regard to the intellectual property as such. But it is definitely a hot topic.
100%. I do have some questions, but first of all, Nick, please give us your perspective on this space.
Yeah, so for us, I guess it's some interesting contrast between the space that Marcel operates in and ours. So because we're primarily residential focused, we're typically working on smaller projects that are quite short in duration. And the design, so you could say the lead design people are involved for a period, and then it tends to hand over to the builder or through the process. So that continuity of a model or a sort of single point of truth across the project doesn't really exist. So we've had to come up with solutions that we want to try and achieve the benefits that everybody's, I guess, envisioning with BIM. BIM hasn't really, in my view, delivered on them yet, but we're basically trying to come up with a solution of being able to provide those benefits to the residential sector. And so we've had to, I guess, avoid a lot of the things that Marcel needs to take on head on, and that IP ownership one is one that we've sort of got around. So what we're able to do is, by extracting the geometry out of the model and whatever data that's in behind it that's available to us, it's basically just a snapshot of the model. We can't edit it, nobody can redesign it. There's very little IP risk around it, so we don't have any real issues with designers being willing to hand that over. And then we can import that in our system, and then we manage it through from there. So I guess the key things for us is, because our projects are quite short, there isn't a massive amount of consulting time for anybody through it to be able to do a whole lot of extra work to enable the process itself. Unlike, say, if you're building a hospital or a multi-story building or something, you can have a team of people that come together and agree how they're going to talk and agree what technologies they're going to use and what standards they're going to use and so on. We have to be basically light touch, minimum overhead, and so we've built our process around being able to do that. So yeah, quite a different contrast, different issues, different challenges. Same sort of fundamental, that the quality of the model to start with is important. We've built, because our designers aren't really, we call it metadata focused. We've basically built tools that we deal with the metadata. So we basically take what we can out of the BIM model and then apply the data that we need and structure it in the way that we need it so that we can complete our process. I think that covers it.
Great. Either way, the quality of the data, obviously going in, the inputs determines the quality of the output, doesn't it? So are you using or recommending any tools or AI in terms of clarifying or checking or qualifying your data? I mean, how are you making sure that the data is up to scratch?
There's different technologies available to date, probably less in the AI, but more up and coming, where the AI is actually interrogating the data behind in order to provide visual I suppose, what we call visual boards to be able to bring the data to the front of users that have less experience, I suppose, with interrogating the data, but more interested in the visual representation of what the meanings are of their data. The technologies today that varies with regard to data verification, and it's always a hot topic anyway, because data for one means different data for others. It depends on who is actually looking at the data and what data is it that they require. We still see often that a lot of data is put in there that absolutely has no value. So that's another topic that needs to be discussed at the onset of a project, is what data is important to those project stakeholders and at what time is that data required, so that people get the right data at the right time, at the right source. But yeah, definitely the data management becomes more of the forefront, and also there's more I suppose personnel involved in order to be able to analyze the type of data that they need at that moment in time. AI is interesting. Definitely, I think we're still at the infancy of the AI with regard to that type of interrogation as such. But I think as we move forward, the industry will move very quickly with regard to utilizing the AI in the background in order to push the data more in the foreground where people need it. But the important part is put the right data in the first place, and that's always debatable. Yeah.
Yes. I'm loving this idea that we might be able to use AI to verify or interrogate our data, as you said, and then later on even use that refreshed data into further AI.
It also depends on what data you're talking about. I mean, there's tools around now like Autodesk Forma, for example, which comes at the early planning stage of designs, that have the ability to analyze wind and analyze sun and also solar requirements, as well as various other analysis it can apply, and it actually is using the AI in the background in order to provide the details of the data that designers are looking for in order to design their buildings better. So AI is used just about everywhere, but it's it's still in its infancy. Even I came across a very nice tool the other day, and you call it AI, but you can install it into Revit, and you can actually type in plain English, please can I have this particular view with all the walls showing red, and it just generates a view with all the walls showing red. You can say, I want to have all my walls with fire rating over a certain value to be red, less than a certain value to be orange, and no fire rating to be green. And it actually just colors it. Now, I'm not sure if you call that AI, but it's been bundled under the AI environment, could also be called automation. So there is that bridge between automation and AI coming in. AI, I think, is still very much machine learning, where the data behind in the background is actually interrogated and decisions are made based on the data that is sourced. So very interesting to see that development moving forward.
There's a lot to explore, isn't there, in those texts?
There is. It's very exciting.
Yes, it's exciting and terrifying in equal measure, I think. But I know there's a lot more we could chat about in terms of AI, but just in terms of going back to the data and the client, how can we set up projects for success? I've heard you talk about things around shared data environments or data management policy, it sounds like. What kinds of things do we need to have in place in the beginning so that our clients have got the expectations that we can meet from a data perspective?
You like me to answer that, or let Nick have a go?
I'd love to hear.
So that's not really us, because we avoid that. So I guess sort of picking up on the previous question, we've done one project using it, or looking to use AI, and there's definitely some challenges to it. And I think, as sort of Marcel touched on, there's a lot of things around that are getting labelled as AI that aren't really. So we could argue our system's AI, but it isn't. It's a whole bunch of algorithms with a whole lot of complexity basically coded in behind it. The issues we found with the first AI project that we did is AI needs a lot of training. It needs an enormous amount of data for training. And what we found with the project we were looking at, which initially looked like it was quite a good use case for AI, is the training time was about equal to the time actually doing the job. So ultimately, it wasn't really that effective. We have got a couple of use cases coming that we are looking to use AI on. We haven't quite got to them in our development pathway yet, but it is around exactly this space, as we call it, elaborating the model. So we were able to get the geometry quite easily out of Revit or ArchiCAD, and we're able to get a limited amount of metadata out of it. So we might have family names or fill names or some limited amount of data. Because we don't have that ability to be able to dictate to designers up front, you need to fill in these pieces of data. We've basically got to work with what we've got, and what we're trying to do is make it as efficient as we can to end up with the structured data that we need. So at the moment, we are manually basically pasting that structured data onto the geometric elements, and that then the combination of that geometry and the data then allows us to complete the costing process. So what we're looking to do with AI is, can we improve that process? So rather than manually pasting it and having a human make decisions, can AI interpret what information is available out of the model and preempt some of those decisions, just to make it a bit more efficient and a bit more accurate? I don't know if it will work. It may end up being, it is just an algorithm and it's something that's still relatively manual. But yeah, that's sort of where I can see sort of AI fitting in for what we're looking to try and do. And so so the whole data structure thing, ours is very structured, has very controlled data, and when our guys are working with it inside our system, we basically guaranteed 100% perfect data because of the way we've built the system. So the key for us is sort of, how can we make best use of whatever data we're getting in to then turn it into the structure that we've got, which is a little bit of a different scenario to what BIM's trying to do with Marcel's type of technology, where you're trying to have everybody creating data at their appropriate points, attaching it to the model, and that data being consistent across the model. That is great, but it's pretty challenging. And so we're sort of saying, okay, we're never going to achieve that because of the space and market we're in. Let's come up with a solution that gives us the end result that we need, which is a model with structured data on it, but do it in a way that is sort of cost effective from a time and input point of view.
Nice. I'm very interested to chat with you a bit more about outcomes and end results. But first of all, Marcel, was there anything about client expectation setting or getting things right and setting up that data environment?
I think it's important to have those discussions at the start of a project, obviously, and we all hopefully are aware with regard to BIM management plans or BIM execution plans. If BIM is still such a word, I still think it should be more project management based, and BIM is just an underlining part of that. But that's very important to get all parties on board and having that initial discussions on what the expectation is of what needs to be created, how it's being managed, and where it needs to be delivered and how it needs to be delivered as well. Again, that prevents an over-creation of what I would call, from a modeling point of view in a product, over-modeling and over-specifying the data, which makes that project model quite heavy and draining, and that makes it also very difficult to maintain the performance across the team. The data sharing is actually being better accommodated using platforms like the Autodesk Construction Cloud, because that allows everybody to be on the same page, being invited in the project, and the data can be accessed anytime, anywhere. That means both in the office as well as in the field simultaneously. So it's exciting to have seen that technology definitely coming on stream since COVID. That definitely was, I think, the starting point of a lot of people valuing more the Autodesk Construction Cloud and having these platforms. The unified platform is what we call them these days, because the data is unified across, from design through to construction through to asset management. The capabilities are right there today. So it's good to see that there is more tendency towards working in those type of environments rather than working within an office on a on-premise server and actually just pushing data through an email or through Dropbox and then waiting for that information to come back. And you very much get a snapshot of that project in time, whereas now the data is a lot more fluid. And at any moment in time, you can go into that project and see where the updates are of the project, or where it was yesterday and where it is today and where was it last week. So it's a lot more informative. And I think that is to the benefit of a lot of projects being driven today, environment, and being able to create better outcomes for clients, and hopefully managing that cost side of delivering projects as well, because that's still very much debatable. Often people say, well, BIM gives us the ability to work faster, smarter, and at a lower cost. But there's other aspects of that sometimes can drive that cost way up there, and that needs to be managed obviously as well. But very, very much inroads in the construction industry now as well, which is good to see. So Autodesk environment especially has gone right across, from the design industry, where they were really strong in into the construction, and now also in the asset management as well.
Yeah, the joined up approach. Look, let's just pause for a second on why we're creating all this extra work in terms of working faster and harder and more accurately, we hope. And I would love to know, especially in your different sectors. So Nick, first, in your residential sector, can you tell us a little bit about some of the wins or some of the end results or outcomes that either your team has experienced or your clients have experienced? Why are we doing all this?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I guess we've got sort of two groups of customers. There's the builders we work with and the designers. So the value proposition's a little bit different to each of them, and the outcomes they're looking for is a bit different. So if you look at the builders first, typically what we're doing is working with them and helping them prepare their presentation to their clients. So understanding what the work's going to be, understanding the scope, and then costing that, and then presenting in such a way that enables them to present it effectively to their clients. And a lot of it, particularly from renovations, so about half what we do is renovations. A lot of it is around understanding scope. And it was something I realized early on when we first got Your QS going, was us understanding the scope from the builder was one of the challenges. So making sure we are costing what the builder knows he's supposed to be doing, it was one challenge. But then I also realized that the builders had a similar challenge when they were presenting their proposals to their clients, so that helping their clients understand exactly what the builder was pricing. And back then we developed the software that we used the 3D model to drive the costing process, but we weren't including the 3D model in any way in our reports. We were just basically doing like a big spreadsheet sort of thing and just presenting a set of numbers. And it meant that the builder struggled to know what we'd allowed for, which is the case with a lot of quotes we see. So like if you get a merchant takeoff or whatever, they might be good, they might not be good. You can't really tell because you just don't know. And so we came up with a way of being able to share our 3D model by taking screenshots of the model and structuring the presentation of the report in a way that the user can see the screenshot of what's in the model and then see the cost breakdown to go with it. And then the builder can then use that. We've got a client version that they can then use with their clients. So I guess the two benefits out of that from our process were the ability to be able to communicate this information as a sort of visual process, which makes it a lot easier for everybody to understand. And then also the methodology that we've developed, because it's all based around the 3D model, it's very visually easy to confirm you've measured something and you've measured it correctly. And so the result of that is we're able to make a much more complete estimate and a much more accurate estimate. The main value for designers is sort of similar. They've got the same sort of issues. For them, what we're looking to try and do is help them understand the cost implications of their decisions as soon as possible. So when I first got involved in the industry, I saw that there was a big gap between when the design was done and then when somebody found out what it cost. And so the designers would be making decisions pretty much in the dark. And at some point, maybe years later, somebody figures out what the cost is. And my view is that the closer we can bring that together, we're going to end up much more efficient design. So as a designer makes a decision about something, ideally they can see the cost impact immediately and say, okay, well, that wasn't such a good idea, let's try this instead. So that's the sort of value we're trying to create with the designers, and using our technology to be able to sort of facilitate that. And then the latest sort of iteration of this whole idea is we've just released what we're calling visual costing. So we develop the 3D model, we cost it, it's all stored in a database in our in-house system, so we could see it, we could access it. So we've just released a web view on it. So we now give our clients a link, a URL to their specific project. They can now go and look at their 3D model, spin it around, take views of it and see the costs, see the labor times and so on that are allowed in it. So it's sort of taking that, what we originally were doing as a PDF report, and making it a sort of visual interactive 3D thing. So it's been quite a few years to bring that together. So it's been really nice to finally get that out after so much effort.
Hey, that's fantastic. It definitely seems that the digital space we're in now is obviously around accuracy and a communication tool, but I'm really liking what I'm hearing about the cost implication and how that's communicated to the client. I remember back to prefab NZ days, and there was a student accommodation building, one of the early prefabricated ones in Auckland, and it was described to us that when the client wanted to move the door frames by 20-30 mils, the model was able to instantly say, and that'll cost $80,000. And then they were able to say, are you sure you want to do that? So without a doubt, so many of our cost overruns are from client changes. So it'd be really great that this is enabling the education of clients to be able to see cost implications of moving that light switch, opening that window, all the rest of it. Yeah, is that, am I on the right track here? That you're democratizing that ability, which is normally in that commercial realm.
And normally there's a time lag, so it's all possible currently. It just takes a long time to get the feedback back. So what we're looking to try and do is just shorten that time.
Great, faster decision making. I'm on board with that. Great. And Marcel, in terms of outcomes, or even in terms of things that you've noticed changing in the last, 20 years, what are you noticing that we're able to deliver better, faster, more accurately?
Well, I think the technology enables us to, provide a better service to clients at the end of the day. But it's also, the change of technology also means that there's a lot more transparency now available across projects, because the technology allows you to do that. And given that transparency, that means that you can invite clients on board as well, be controlled in some cases, but that transparency is definitely better able to be managed now with the technologies that we have available. Whereas in the past, you were sitting on the drawing board, I had a model, and the client came into the office and had a look, or even if the client wasn't living in Auckland, somehow you had to communicate it to a client in Wellington. I mean, the problems were there. Nowadays, it's not an issue. You can access that data and view, the information from just about anywhere, which is fantastic. So I think from that point of view, I mean, it's interesting to see that the type of questions that clients come with is still quite varied. We still got quite a few clients that actually haven't engaged in the computer-aided design, if we can call it that, rather than BIM. And even recently we had a company said, we used to outsource this, but we would like to now take that on board, because we want to be able to provide a wider range of service to our clients, rather than relying on other consultants to be able to come in and help us doing that. And also it comes back to ownership of the data again. And I said, well, you got to start somewhere. So we get clientele that start right from the beginning, have nothing and need something. We then map out a roadmap for them, where they can start, how they can grow with that technology, and what they need to take on board in order to drive that effectively. But we're getting also the other side of the spectrum, where they might have been using technology for the last 10 years. They've got a project, and we had one recently where they said, we're doing this particular exercise, and I think I've sent you a customer success story on that one. And it takes us 3 or 4 days to actually analyze the data and to be able to correct that information inside that model, inside that BIM model. So we took that on board, we reviewed it, we spent some time on it, I suppose, is what I would say. Our technical experienced people in programming, they came on board with that project. And in the end, we were able to deliver them a solution that allows them to analyze and correct that project model within 90 seconds, as opposed to 3.5 days. So, that type of I suppose, wide scope of different type of activities that we get involved in is definitely there. But it's still very much, great to see that, we got very much long-term clients on board that have been on board with Cadpro for the last 20, 25 years, if not 30, and seeing their business grow inside that environment. So where some of them become more self-servant, others, have more that strong partnership with our organization where they come back with some of these challenges that that they find difficult to resolve within their own business. And we basically become, like they work with their consultants, become a consultant to their business, more in the digital environment rather than in being a structural engineer or being a mechanical services engineer. We come in at the digital side. And that includes, the topic around BIM management as well, because obviously projects need to be rolled out. Somebody needs to manage the data, and then, we can service that type of environment for clients as well.
Right. Let's chat briefly about some of the things we've seen or noticed over the last few years, and moving forward, how we try and get past some of these challenges. Because, of course, we're only able to move at the digital speed of the slowest digital operator in the chain. And of course, Marcel, you spoke very much about the unified platform and then the opportunity to bridge between different digital tools, for example. And Nick, your process is very much a handover process from design to builder, etc. Can you, each of you, just give us some insight in terms of how we managed to, once we've moved from 2D to 3D, how we managed to remain in 3D, even though our consent process seems to still be in 2D. I mean, what are the stumbling blocks out there, or what challenges do you see out there that we potentially have to get over in the next 20 years?
Well, I think the challenge that we have to get over pretty quickly is the reliability of the model. Because in a lot of cases, there are still disclaimers when a model is being presented from one design consultant to another design consultant that the building information model is for information only. And obviously, we're still living in the consent process that's very much still 2D PDF focused as well, which needs to change. Some countries that has changed, and I think there's been attempts made in New Zealand as well to change that process and become more oriented towards that handover of the 3D model, which is all possible these days. But again, it comes back to the verification of the data, the reliability of the data. We're talking about level of development, LODs. That's another term that sort of disappeared a little bit, but there's the level of development which reaches from what they call 100 through to 700 or 800. But it really is about the higher the level of development, the more trust you can actually put into that model. So again, it's the ability to manage the data from A to Z, where it needs to be handed over, whoever needs to have access to the data to make sure that the data is correct, the model is correct. But again, we don't model everything, and Nick knows that because he does a lot of the QSs as well. You're not going to model, your nails. You're not going to model your hinges on your doors and things like that. So there's still a lot of data that we don't model, but we still need to have the data associated with those elements in order to drive those, those costings, for example. So very much so in that the model is an information model, but the reliability really comes along the way of how is that model maintained, how is the data maintained behind it, and what is the end use of that particular model? Why do we model that particular building in this fashion for what purpose? And that will determine the type of data and the reliability of the data that needs to exist, and obviously that needs to be monitored along the way.
Okay, so surely Nirvana looks like an enduring model which can be used for maintenance, facilities management, and ongoing purposes, and has some type of operational updating to keep it alive. But what we're hearing is we haven't reached that Nirvana yet. It is a paperless project. Nick, if you can answer this one, are we trying to get to a Nirvana which is paperless? Much like the presentation actually that we heard from Bridget White, who'd spent 10 years at the Office of Nordic Architecture in Norway, where they're just starting to deliver paperless buildings. We heard about that at Build Up conference last year, and the prezo's on our website on the resources tab if anyone wants to watch it. It's really interesting. But Nick, tell us, what's your Nirvana?
Yeah, so I guess you're just picking up a few things there. So we're completely paperless. So I've got a printer over there, but it's only the odd form maybe. So we very rarely print everything. So everything's electronic. The bulk of our work is, so while we've got this 3D capability, it's pretty new and we haven't been pushing it hard yet because we've still been solving issues around it. So the bulk of our work is actually receiving PDF drawings, and then we create the 3D model using our software over the top of the PDF drawings. So we effectively convert those PDF drawings into a 3D model for us to then be able to do the costing process. And what being able to import the model from the architect will do for us is save us having to do that. So partly probably not so much a time saving, it's a bit of a break even because our tool's pretty quick, but more accuracy that when we're importing the model in, instead of modeling over a PDF at 1 to 100, we're getting in that millimeter accurate model to start with. So yeah, we would sort of, the nirvana would be, I think the ideal, as you described, that would be the ultimate. Whether we're ever going to get there, I used to be a passionate supporter and spoken a lot about that's what we want to achieve. I'm probably somewhat wiser now. I don't know if it's possible, to be honest, because there's just so many pieces you've got to get so right. It's I can't see how we're going to get there, but what we've tried to do is say, okay, well, how can we clip the best bits of the value of that idea out of it with the least amount of additional work so that we can actually make an achievable process? So that's what we've done. And the sort of thing that Marcel raised, hinges, nails. So we cost hinges, we cost nails, but we don't model them. We use metadata and algorithms to determine how many nails or how many hinges or whatever the detail is. Even in timber floors, we don't model the floor. We just model basically the volume of the floor, and then we use metadata to work out and how many joists are needed. So we've got algorithms that'll work out what joists, what blocking, the user tells them what size they are. So we're able to infer the level of detail right down to how many nails you need without necessarily having to model it. So it's basically trying to come up with a way of achieving the outcome that we can see as possible and desire with the least amount of work. And so we've achieved it. We've achieved a process of going from a 3D model to a really detailed cost. Now what we're looking at is how can we make that more efficient? How can we tie in what the designer's doing? How can we make it faster? How can we make it more automated? So I guess my ultimate vision is, the architect's making design decisions in Revit or ArchiCAD, and in the bottom corner is a Speedo that's just changing the cost, and it's basically feeding that model out to our system. We're costing it and feeding the answer back. That's sort of what we're aiming at. Whether we get there or not, I don't know. But the closer we can get and the more steps we can take out getting there, then I think the better the outcome is for everybody.
No. So what I'm taking from that is there's a dose of one eye looking to the future and an optimistic lens, and one eye really the lived experience of how much work it is and where we've got to date. So a dose of realism, which I think is a useful balanced approach to take as we move forward into a slightly unknown era around AI and where digital first solutions will take us next. Look, I'm just going to take the opportunity to pause because I feel like we could keep going, and just thank you both very, very much. And just do a very quick sum up as we head to the end of our 45 minutes. Look, the next of these Institute of Building Industry Insights events are on the 9th of April. We'll be looking at sustainability and hearing from a concrete specialist, Nick Gifford at Allied Concrete, and also from Christy Jones, who was the Building People Awards winner in 2024 for sustainability. For innovation. She's a sustainability manager. She's with Cook Brothers. So that'll be another very interesting conversation, I'm sure, and I hope you will tune in then. Look, on the theme of making messy starts and prototyping, I just want to say thank you for bearing with us while we try a different webinar platform this time. And we will be back on deck with you on the 9th of April. Thank you very much to Nick. Thank you very much to Marcel. Thanks for joining us today. We hope to see you at Digicom next week. And thanks for joining us online. You'll find the links for this conversation on our website and the resources tab and the recording of today. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Ka kite anō. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.